Papa loves mambo, Mama loves mambo. Look at him sway with it, getting so gay with it, shouting Olay with it, wow.
Hello and welcome to the final episode of our game club for BioShock 1. I'm still here. We're now joined by Javy Gwaltney.
I was here last time.
Yeah, that's true. We have Elise Favis.
Yeah, Favis. Hey.
How would you pronounce it?
Elise Favis.
There we go. And Suriel Vazquez.
It's pronounced Elise Favis, actually.
There we go.
It's two of us
That's a good
now.
joke.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm glad we're back. We're back because we all finished the first BioShock, and we're going to talk about the second half of that game, which was shorter than I expected.
Yeah.
Doesn't take too long, actually, to get through it.
Yeah, like after Fort Frolic, I was expecting another
no,
10 hours or so, because I think JB said, like, oh, it's like 40% of the way through for Fort Frolic. And so I had that in my mind, but really, I think I only spent like 4 or 5 hours to finish it off. So definitely under 15 overall for me. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I feel like the sections ramp up in a way. Like, I think as you get towards the end of the game, the sections get shorter and shorter just to just funnel you towards that ending.
Yeah.
Shorter and shorter and worse is what I would argue. But I think we're going to talk about that stuff. So to kick things off, should we go through some feedback from last episode from the community? Because a lot of lovely people wrote into podcastinginformer.com with their thoughts on Game Club, and a ton of people played through BioShock with us. I think there were more people playing along than any other game club. So thank you to the readers and viewers and all that.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
First piece of feedback comes from Ken L. From Boston. He says, I enjoyed the game club, and I agreed with lots of what I heard, except security bots. They are an objective good, like pizza.
I disagree.
I also disagree with this asshat.
This Ken
Pizza suck,
sounds
no.
familiar.
This is Ken Levine.
Who is this guy?
Yeah, Mr. BioShock himself, creative director of the game and whatnot. He sent that tweet saying that security bots are an objective good.
Remember, I
saw
said they
that
were good.
Okay, well, clearly you're correct. I stand by them being not good. And
They're pests is what they are.
less frustrating in the back half of the game. It seemed like
There were less of those moments where you had to kind of stealthily, avoid those red spotlights.
Right,
So-
right.
I had
Which
the
I
exact
appreciated.
opposite experience.
Really?
Because I feel like, I guess maybe there were less, but I just stopped caring at a point. So I triggered like way more alarms in the latter half of the game than I did early on.
This is a sneaking mission.
Sorry, I went guns blazing towards the end.
So
of
the
it.
second that you trigger an alarm, do you guys open up the map and look for the bot deactivation
Nope.
panel?
I just electro everything
Yeah.
and then blow
I
it
was
up.
Come at me.
You have to go through so many electro bolts just to take those things out.
Oh, when an alarm activates. I thought you meant whenever
Right.
like
Oh, yeah.
something sees you, then yeah.
Okay. You just
Yeah,
run
but
for
like
the
if a
panel?
security bot or like one of the chair sentry gun sees me, then I just fry it, blow it up.
Naturally, yeah. I had a weird experience where I booted the game up right after Fort Frolic. I forget what the next section is called. Hephaestus?
Yeah, Hephaestus.
Thank you. Booted it up, and I was on the remaster version on PC, and it kept on crashing again. And I was just like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm done with this. So I downloaded a save for the original and went back and jumped into the original one on Steam, which it turns out still looks great. But along with that save, then it was completely different plasmids, like maxed out money, basically all the secrets. It's like 100% playthrough. So I just felt incredibly overpowered booting up the save, and it was kind of fun to go into it.
You went the parasite route.
I guess so, yeah. It was a great thrill, like, oh my gosh, what is this? Now if I don't move, I'm invisible? And all these things that I had no idea were even in the game. And like this person really maximized like being stealthy and using the wrench a fair amount. It's like, well, I guess I have to try doing that because it seems to be the build they were going for. So it was strange picking up from that. But if you guys had any more technical issues?
Nope. It's been fine on PS4 for me. I mean,
Okay.
some weird textures where walls disappear briefly, but
Yeah.
I think I was having an issue with audio diaries sometimes not when I was pressing X not going, but
Okay.
I don't know. That was the only thing. And then earlier on I was having a problem with the what was it? I think with the pause menu. I actually can't remember now, but it was
Sure.
something going on there.
Okay.
I had a thing where when I launched the game at one point, it reset everything, so it was running at like 720 or something, and like all my options weren't saved, and had to go back and redo everything, like turn on windowed mode or whatever. It was a weird.
Oh yeah, I think
reset I had
it
to
was
take.
freezing for me. That's what was happening. With
Okay.
pause menu.
Well, I'm glad we all made it through it.
Yeah.
So Pat O'Connor writes in and says, hey guys, and Elise, I loved the last episode, but I was surprised you guys didn't bring up Gary Scheinman's score at any point. I think the melancholic strings, coupled with the excellent choices of licensed tracks, Fallout Eat Your Heart Out, he says, expertly complement the game's iconic atmosphere. The actual original music isn't as frequent as it is in BioShock Infinite, but I think that makes it all the more effective and emotionally impactful when it does appear. The brief crescendo, help me, when you choose to spare little sister makes that rare experience of kindness and rapture even more profound. Yeah, we didn't really talk about the original music. What do you guys think?
I think it's nice when it, like he says, when it does show up. Like it does sort of hammer on, whatever's going on at the moment. But, it doesn't necessarily stick out to me in the way that something like Fallout soundtrack does.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I can dig it.
I think that I like it when there are moments, might have been in Fort Frolic or just, when I was going against splicers, there's this very theatrical music that comes on during these fight parts, which just make it so much fun.
Right. Well, I guess, you actually played through Fort Frolic now because you hadn't quite gotten there last time.
Yeah, it's Flight of the Valkyries, isn't it? Or something.
Waltz of we talked about the Nutcracker suite.
Yeah, the Nutcracker. Yeah.
That whole thing, whatnot.
I love that.
I didn't know that we'd get to see Sander Cohen again. Or at least have a reference to him.
That was
You can see him again.
You can actually, if you didn't kill him in Fort Frolic, kill him there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Which is what I did.
Yeah,
I killed him later on.
I was curious about it because it's like two people dancing, and it's like, these splicers are having a lovely time. They
right,
look
and
really
he's kind of warning you, don't disturb us.
Right.
But if you do, then a battle starts with him. And you can kill him off.
Interesting. Did you guys do that?
Yeah.
I always kill him off immediately, before then, just to get his goodie box.
I didn't want to kill him off originally just because there was something very intriguing about him, in a very creepy way. But I was just like, no, I want to see where this goes. And I'm glad I did because then I had that weird scene where I went into a battle with him later. So.
Yeah.
I like the difference in attitude that he has when you face him. And he's like, because when you, in Fort Frolic, he's like, he's very he's a flair for the dramatic and being very theatrical, but when you enter his realm and you kill him, he's like, I'm coming down there to kick your ass or whatever. He just opens up the door and says, I'm Sander Cohen or whatever. And he's just belligerent, possibly drunk, and you just shoot him in the face like you do everybody else. And
there we go.
He does.
So speaking of shooting in the face, Mitch here writes in and says, having played Infinite more recently... Oh, hang on a second. This is Ryan Davis. I'm sorry. Hey, friends. So first of all, I wanted to let Elise know that she's not the only one who was weirded out the first time they played BioShock. Javy excused the game a little bit last week, saying that shooters back then were clunky, and Ben, crazy guy that you are, said it actually controlled pretty well. Think about what you're saying! Sure, the plasmids are fun and still feel pretty good, but the shooting mechanics are undeniably clunky, even for a 2007 game. Some contemporaries of BioShock include Modern Warfare 1 and Halo 3.
I want Modern Warfare.
There we go. Thank you, JB. Do you guys think it's fair to talk about BioShock as a really great game, maybe even one of the best, without classifying it as a great shooter?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, and other stuff makes up for it. I still would argue it's not that bad. Maybe I'm just not precise.
No, it's not
shooter.
bad. It's not awful, especially if you're thinking about it by 2007 standards.
And he compares it to Halo 3 and Modern Warfare, like the two pinnacles of console FPS feel. Of course, it's not going to feel as good as that, but compared to average 2007 shooters,
there's also more to it. The actual aim your gun and shoot a dude in the face. I feel like that suffers a little bit. Well, it suffers a lot, but I feel like there's more to a shooter than how the guns actually feel. Because I feel like BioShock excels because I feel like the situations change enough during combat, and I feel like I have answers to those changing situations. So if I want to burn someone, I have to factor in, are they near water? And if they are in water, do I want to switch to electrobolt and electrocute them? So the shooting may not be greater by those standards, but the combat I think is actually really good.
Absolutely. You never recommend BioShock as a shooter.
Right.
To me, it's you hear the same thing about Deus Ex. You never really hear, at least the first Deus Ex, called a shooter. But, it and BioShock fit firmly in the same category for me.
Right. I wouldn't say for a design course, in shooters, this is how you want to tune your shooter. But if you want to say, this is how you actually do combat and make it expressive and fun, then yeah.
And it gives you so many ways to approach different combat scenarios, and that's what makes it so great. That's also what makes Deus Ex so great.
Yeah, for sure. I really love by the end of the game, going through all these weapon upgrades, how stupid the pistol looks. I don't know if you guys upgraded it all the way, but it's just this lopsided, bulgy, ugly mess with nonsense strapped onto it. It's fun seeing those.
My favorite
changes.
is the crossbolt, because all the other upgrades for all your other weapons are just so zany, like the pistol and the shotgun, and it's nope, you're just sticking a bar on top of your crossbow. crossbow. It's like, okay, man, I don't really get this, but
Make it
sure.
easier to play peekaboo with that thing. Just-
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't use the crossbow enough. I think it's really
I love
cool
it.
every
Me
time I
neither.
used it. But
It's like the most powerful weapon.
Yeah.
Like it kills, like on later levels, it'll kill pretty much any splicer in one hit,
Yeah.
especially if you upgrade the bolts.
okay.
It is fun to use. I feel like I forgot about it in a way.
Am I not? That's what you have in Burial at Sea, BioShock Infinite Part 2's, like the second part of the DLC, right? I think when you're Elizabeth, I think you have a crossbow.
I've
don't
tried
you?
to forget about it.
Really? Why? What's wrong with that?
I just don't like Burial at Sea.
What?
at all.
Interesting. Go
It's
on.
it's very fan servicey in a way that's not compelling to me. Like it feels like you stack that against something like Mass Effect 3 Citadel DLC, which, you know, people who wrote that and designed that were clearly like reading up on forums about like all like the ships and stuff, like what people were really into.
Yeah.
And there's just so much zany, heartfelt love there. Whereas Burial at Sea just feels like a cold, sort of dour amusement park ride through a place we've already been. And oh, here's a cameo from, you know, Sandra Cohen.
Hey, look at this. I had probably had the non-ideal route of playing that because I played that not having played BioShock, so all that fan service was just confusion for me, and it was just like, oh, I'm glad I got to
I
explore
hadn't
that for a
finished
little bit.
BioShock at the time,
Right.
so the ending I was just like, okay, only half comprehending what's going on here, but I really liked seeing like Rapture in its glory days.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
I mean, that is cool. Like, that is like the only cool thing about that DLC to me is like, oh, wow, this is Rapture before the fall. This is really neat. And, you know, the graphical improvements and whatnot. But just as a whole, like, experience of here's a story that you're living out and you're interacting and you're, you know, seeing things fall apart. It just wasn't that interesting to me.
You would rather it not exist.
I would have rather not played it. I would say, you know, I'm not going to say.
There's so much good about Burial at Sea.
I would not say, you know, this shouldn't exist. It's just, I just wish I had played it.
Sure. Mitch writes in now, and he says, having played Infinite more recently, I can't help but notice this obsessive backtracking that I find myself doing. The on-screen arrow, which I know you can easily disable, is both a blessing and a curse. I am constantly finding myself fighting this dreaded arrow, frantically running opposite its constantly insistent pointedness, so that I may find every power-up, audio log, safe, etc. On the one hand, it's a great tool to both encourage this kind of angry exploration, as well as give clear guidance towards the next objective, while on the other hand, it's an obnoxious arrow that I never trust until I am damn well ready to. What do you guys think about the old objective arrow?
That
I
sounds
turned it
about.
off.
Did you? Oh, that's right. I forgot you're going for.
I
hardcore
keep it
run.
on, but that sounds about right. Usually I'll look around everywhere first before heading in its direction.
It depended on where I was feeling playing it this weekend. Of like, am I going to get this done in time for Game Club? Should I follow this thing, or should I purposefully avoid it? It's a weird feeling in a game to have an objective arrow, and then all you're worried about is I need to hit up every place except for where that's telling me to go, just to make sure that I can make it work.
Right. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's because I've played through it so many times, but it's just like I'll look up at it occasionally if I need to remember, okay, what path do I need to go down? But otherwise I just don't notice it. Like it's not even there until I need it to be.
I remember a lot of BioShock Infinite was spent hitting the back button, getting that little like guidance thing.
That was a really cool thing.
It was, but I feel like maybe it's just because the environments are so much more complicated in Infinite. I'm sure some people would argue that. But I felt like in Infinite, it was less clear about where to go. Whereas in the first BioShock, like I knew that it was leading me the right way. I knew that if I had to go up the stairs, if I maneuvered this way, it would point exactly where I needed to go. Whereas Infinite, it'd be like, go over here. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to get over there. I don't know where you're trying to tell me to go. Where it gets jarring in the first BioShock is when it doesn't pop up at all. Which it happens a fair amount towards the end, because it turns out basically the game from this point on is just a series of fetch quests.
Oh boy. Sorry, I'm just thinking about the becoming Big Daddy stuff. Pissed me off a bunch. But
I
anyway.
completely forgot that was a thing. I'm sure at some point I heard somebody mention it, but the community also had those thoughts. Let's see. So Kevin from Denmark says, I love BioShock and have probably beaten the game 3 times. There is, however, one thing that I forgot, which really annoyed me. When you become a Big Daddy and get the helmet, the screen turns into a circle to show you the perspective of a Big Daddy. I felt my view was more disoriented and served no purpose. Am I alone on this thought?
Was the most infuriating thing. Like, your view is so obscured by that stupid helmet, and it doesn't do anything. It's
Yeah. I feel like I take more issue with the fact that they don't stick the landing on that. They don't actually follow through on having the rest of the game be like that, because by the time you get to the last battle, like that, they just seem to have forgotten about that whole thing where you're a big daddy at that point.
Well, Fontaine clearly says like, "Oh, it's not going to help you. That 25% damage boost to defense." It's like, okay, well then why am I doing this? Like, I fully expected to have like the drill arm and like ram it through his head or something like that.
But they don't. They just say like, "Oh, your view is obscured for this one part of the game," and then we just go back to like having your view be fine.
I would argue that the game as a whole does not stick the landing after the big twist. Like everything after that is either mildly enjoyable or absolutely miserable.
Yeah, I feel like switching narrators from Atlas to Fontaine, I think, is maybe the only thing that I really like about that latter half of the game or whatever. But everything else is just like, I feel like the environments we go see aren't as interesting as the first one. And that ending is like, it's like a Tekken ending.
It's
like
bad.
It's like finishing a fighting game story mode, and then it's just like, here's everything that happens for the rest of the rest of time.
Yeah, it's my problem. My problem is that it goes from being like this grand sort of sci-fi action adventure with a little bit of horror, where you're exploring this great place and you're trying to unravel a mystery, to something that's basically an arcadey revenge plot. And it's just the worst.
I feel like it goes from like, check out this world to like, no, wrap it up. We got to wrap up this.
That's what it feels
line.
like. It feels rushed. Like it is the ultimate rushed section in the game, is those last 2 or 3 hours.
Just because it feels like, hey, here's a fetch quest. Have at it. Get it over with.
Here's another fetch quest.
Right. Hey, what do you think about another fetch quest?
Yeah.
And also like just the overall goal and objective. I feel like in the first half, it does a really good job of making it clear like, hey, this is your larger mission. This is your larger mission. First, it's like rescue Atlas's family, take down Andrew Ryan. And then I guess larger mission is like dig yourself out of this hole, stop being brainwashed, take potion 192. It's like, oh, that's not quite enough. We need to do more. It's like there's nothing fun with a larger goal of just, hey, dig yourself out of this narrative hole, player. It's like you need something more than that. And to have the way that you dig yourself out of this hole and get back to even is then to do all these fetch quests.
Yeah.
It's
and
not
then
great.
One of just a terrible boss battle. That boss battle is so bad.
That did nothing for me.
We have so much to unpack here.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going on Big Daddy, because a lot of people had thoughts on this.
Okay.
Barbara Joe writes in and says, I'd like to say just how much I despise the Big Daddy helmet. Anything that obstructs my field of vision in a video game is just the worst. I also can't help but think about how stupid Jack looks during that whole sequence. Clomping around in the boots and the helmet of a Big Daddy, but he's still got that dumb grandpa sweater on. No Big Daddy suit at all. Did they just not want to create new arm models for Jack, or am I missing something? He must look like a toddler trying on an adult's clothing.
That's,
Wasn't he not wearing the gloves, though? I thought that was the whole...
Yeah, I think that was part of the... Yeah, that whole thing. It was also the only time I ever got lost, because I was looking for the boots I was looking for a while. It's like, where the hell is the library?
The boots was the first thing I got. I couldn't
Really?
find the last thing. I forget if it was the scent.
It
like
was
the pheromones.
the third scent thing that I couldn't find. I was like, oh my God, where is it?
Yeah, that's in a slightly different
I
area.
found everything else while looking for the boots. I think it was the first thing. I'm gonna go find the boots.
I do like the sound design and how that changes when you put on the helmet. Everything gets muffled and it kind of makes you feel distant. Or even the boots having like the heavy stomping
just
around.
Walking around as Big Daddy and with the little sister beside you and hearing that like booming voice, like it for a second it would take me aback, and I'm like, oh wait, no, that's me. It's not another Big Daddy. That's me.
Do they explain that, why you have to have your voice modulated to attract
so that
the
you
little
can
sisters?
talk to the little sisters, I guess. But yeah, so there's that weird like.
So you can become the little sister whisperer.
Well, but in the voice modulation area, they have like this weird grindy thing where it's like, oh, got to change your voice box. And I'm like, is this going to be some effed up sequence where they like shove it down my throat in first person? It's like, no, there's none of that.
It just starts spinning and then, oh, you're good.
Yeah. All right. We'll go easy on it. Chris from Chicago says, this is the first time I've gotten a chance to play a game for a game club, and also my first time writing. So hello. Hello, Christopher. Finishing the remaster up, I had completely forgotten about the whole Become a Big Daddy boss fight at the end. While the big twist ranks up there as one of my favorite storytelling moments in games, I can't help feel put off by that last boss sequence with Fontaine. After a dark sci-fi experience that felt at least semi-rooted in reality, an arena boss fight spent pouring clips into a superpowered monster hooked up to a machine felt totally out of place. Am I totally alone here? Although I must say that Big Daddy suit grandpa sweater pairing can't be beat.
People have.
I love his Geralt sweater. It's the best. That's what I kept thinking about, is like all of Geralt's beginning armor in The Witcher 3, because they're just Christmas sweaters.
Right, right. Yeah, I also had that moment where I didn't really know what the boss fight looked like at the end. Like, I knew that people weren't overly happy with it, but when you open up, when the door opens up and you see Atlas sitting there, it's like, is this like a Destiny raid boss? This is just the most bizarre, out of place thing.
It's weird.
So Johnny Superhoffy writes in on that topic and says, "What a disappointment the end of BioShock was. Our love fest has completely changed from episode 1. That ridiculous boss fight with Fontaine was completely unnecessary. Some games just shouldn't have boss fights. Although I do like how they made the bad ending better than the good ending. Also, if you are very unprepared for it, having little ammo, first aid kits, money, and if you didn't save before heading up, you may not be able to even beat the boss fight. The level before has to be one of the most frustrating escort missions in video game history. The little sisters are extremely weak and will die almost instantly, and they keep on complaining that you're too slow when you're in front of them. It was enough to drive me to my boiling point. P.S. Earthbound for next game club." All right, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, the escort stuff. It wasn't that bad for me. The most annoying part for me was just her constantly calling you Mr. B.
Yeah.
Come on, Mr.
The
Bubbles.
hurry up, come on.
I can
see the
angels dancing in the sky.
Just a lot of repeated lines.
Yeah.
It seems like the mission statement for BioShock Infinite was like, let's take that relationship and just make her into Elizabeth and make sure that she's not annoying this time around, which I feel like largely they succeeded with.
Yeah.
Because there is something there about, working your way through this environment with somebody, but it just wasn't done in the best way.
Right.
Jeff from Massachusetts writes in and says, "Big Daddy complaint here. During the whole game, you can't hurt a little sister while Big Daddy lives. But you have to play through a section where you have to defend the little sister, and she dies really easily. It doesn't match up with all the events leading up to this point."
Yeah, it's weird because don't they mention that like they have super regenerative powers or
Yeah,
whatever?
I thought
like
they
there's-
were like immune.
Yeah, almost like indestructible or whatever. And
You
then
got the
So I
one
don't
that
really
doesn't, the
understand.
one
Yeah.
that's just super weak and ready to die.
she's immune to my
Yeah.
wrench
One.
is the only thing I know. I kept like trying to see if it'd damage her and it didn't do anything.
Or you're trying to fix her by putting a
yeah,
wrench
yeah.
up her nose.
I was trying to play Battlefield and fix her with my wrench. I whacked her.
Wow. Okay.
I liked hearing the splicers coming. When she was like mining the atom out of the guys, you could just hear them running Serious Sam style, like coming around the corners. I thought that was kind of fun. And I don't know. Do you hate that section, JB?
No, I don't hate it. I just like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember trying to play it on hard when you had to get all the achievements of like, oh, never use Vita Chamber and like, play it on the hardest difficulty or whatever. And I remember having a lot of issues with it then, but this time it was like fine. I had actually at some point I was just like looking for stuff and I was like, oh right, I should go defend the little sister and just went back and backtracked.
All you
and
need
killed,
is telekinesis. You just pick up a corpse, throw it at them, create more corpses, throw more corpses. It's just never-ending ammo.
It's beautiful, JB.
I'm not sure how I feel about the disconnected way you say that. Like, all you need are corpses, man. Just make more corpses.
It is true that they're useful. I'm just thinking, those like electrical wires.
Yes.
You can just get the corpse and you go through, and it's like
Wait, what?
The
get it to shock a
bolt
corpse
traps.
instead of you by using
To trample.
telekinesis.
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
because if you try to telekinesis the bolts, it'll come back and like 75% chance it'll shock you, but you can
Okay.
just pick up stuff and throw them
Yeah.
through there.
Oh, interesting. So, contrary to what Johnny Super Hoffy wrote in, saying Jamie from Meridian says, "One thing that stands out for me is how easy and quick the Fontaine fight is. I say this as someone who does not play many shooters. What do y'all think? I was playing on medium difficulty and just kept hitting him with the grenade launcher, which
Yeah.
brought him down really quick. Otherwise, I still had fun playing one of my favorites again."
I think you have to, if you had to describe a boss battle, is I had to keep hitting him with the grenade launcher. I don't think that's a quick fight.
That's true. Yeah, just maybe not complicated
Not
for
an
them.
interesting
Yeah,
fight, though.
it's just he is just a bullet
Simplistic.
sponge. is
Yeah,
the problem.
like
Really?
it is the bare minimum boss fight.
There's,
Just because it's you and a big guy.
But, I mean,
it's
there's a
just-
little bit
there's
of like,
not even any like clever technique to it,
all right, that's fair. But what about like changing his elements? That's something. When he like cycles through, oh, now I'm ice, now I'm fire, and you have to kind of Pokemon it up and realize what plasmid you should be using instead.
It still feels like a boss fight in like a Nintendo, like original Nintendo or Super Nintendo game, though. It just feels so misplaced. It's so wacky, and I don't know.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's just a consistent theme of that game, though. Is that like every time they want you to fight someone who's important, it's just they take the regular character model and they just give it a ton of health. Like Steinman was that way too.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was cool that you actually had to like mine the atom out of it, and that it tied into gameplay by actually
Yeah.
going up on your little UI element. That was a
Somewhat
neat little
thematically
touch.
appropriate, yeah.
I'm also not in love with the ending, but I'd say it's above an NES game.
Well,
no,
which,
no, no, I
which,
just mean
which
the
ending did you
fight.
get though?
I mean the fight, not
Right.
the ending.
Yeah,
Did,
the ending I thought was just trash.
Did we all get the good ending?
No, I got the bad ending,
Really?
Oh,
which is stupid because like I maybe harvested 4 little
That's
sisters
too
throughout the course of
many.
it. And
I
it
only killed
you
4
can-
little girls. I'm still a good person.
well, it treated me like I wanted to like conquer the world as Hitler by the end. I was like, wait, what? This is
4
what
little
my
girls.
character? It treated me like I was just slaughtering absolutely
little girls.
everybody. Hashtag 4 little girls. No, but also it was just so quick, and it was me looking at guys on a submarine like, what's happening here? I guess I'm taking over the world. All right, back to title screen.
The good
no
ending
credits.
is just super cheesy. So
What happens there?
we save the little, like 4 or 5 little sisters, and you go back up to the surface, and then they kind of become like your daughters. Like
You become grandpa.
And then it just kind of cycles through your life, and you see it ends with you on your deathbed, and like the little sisters like holding your hand.
Like there's a whole hand motif where it's like, first you like grab her hand, and then it's like she's like getting her diploma with her hand, like someone's.
Are
handing
you
her a
kidding
diploma.
me?
No,
And then, then they
Little
get
sister
married.
gets a diploma?
Then like one of them is like accepting a ring from some guy, and then
It's so sappy.
I think this is a Google ad.
It's so sappy. It's
The post credit sequence for this podcast should be you watching that and us like
that'd be
filming your
fun.
reaction.
That sounds really dumb. So like, does it show like Jack in the crowd at the graduation wearing a Big Daddy
No.
helmet?
No,
like,
it's-
oh,
it just
literally
cuts
all
from one
hands.
it cuts from one shot of like some form of hand exchange taking place, where it's just like the diploma, the ring, and then Jack letting go of someone's hand because he's dying.
Does
Yeah.
it show credits in this version? Because it was really weird that there were no credits in
No,
mine.
you don't get the credits if you're good.
Yeah.
Weird.
It's not a weird unlock
It's,
thing.
yeah, it's not a great end. This is kind of why I prefer BioShock 2 out of all of them. It's because I think
Overall.
Oh yeah, overall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
you say that with a little wry smile.
No,
like
no,
you're really
no,
pulling
no.
one over
Well,
on
it's
people.
because you ignore. I think a lot of people are. They always have like no way. It's like the original one is way better because it did all this original stuff. But like BioShock is like maybe one of my favorite second drafts of like, no, let's actually do this part well.
Yeah, BioShock 2 is just, to me, it's a more satisfying whole experience. Where BioShock, I would not argue that BioShock has, more important moments in terms of like what it contributed to video games, and some more like jaw-dropping moments. But as taken as like an interactive story, like with characters and how they evolve, who they become, I just think BioShock 2 is better.
Huh.
It has more endings, and most of them are more satisfying.
Yeah, it's like 8 endings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
depending on how many sisters you murder, and depending on how many other people you murder, it's a murder checklist.
So for the perfect game, you want to just have credits roll after Andrew Ryan, and then just bleed right into BioShock 2. Just cut out that back half of BioShock 1.
I would have had Jack die right after the twist, and that'd be the end of the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
run the
it would just
boxes
be
in.
completely bleak and memorable, and not here's this video game bullshit.
He gets eaten by a whale.
Yes.
That's right.
What is it with
and
you
then
and the whale?
The whale
I can't
puts
talk
the
about
key into that machine, and then suddenly the whale and Fontaine run Rapture.
I'm into it.
I would. Yeah, that's how SpongeBob SquarePants happens.
No one understands me like this whale. Darren from Stillwater, Minnesota says, "Hello, everyone. I had only played until about halfway through BioShock before this game club, and I was left a little bit underwhelmed by the game back then. Now, after playing through the game in its entirety, I will say I can definitely see where all the praise comes from. It's a really good game. I love how the game slowly drips new mechanics and gameplay aspects throughout, and also some of the most memorable interactions between the characters in this game are great. I thought the scene with Ryan commanding you to kill him was fantastic. The ending, though, was a little underwhelming for me. The final boss fight felt out of place and pulled from another game, and the quick little scene with the little sisters, good ending, at the end was a little disappointing. I'm glad I gave the game another try. P.S. Dishonored 2 for the next game club." All right, thanks, Darren. Yeah, so everybody loves the Andrew Ryan scene and the Andrew Ryan climax.
It's a good moment.
It's great.
I guess my question for you, Ben, is how much did you know before going into this? Because I feel like that's one of those moments you would just eventually learn about, no matter whether you'd played it or not.
I knew that you beat him to death with a golf club, and actually I wrote down in my notes right when I started, here's all I know. I wrote, Atlas screws you over. You're made to question why you've been doing what you're told in the video game with Would You Kindly. Harvesting little sisters has consequences, and there's a climax and then a long, dragged-out ending. I thought it was like maybe a little bit like Inside, where there's a climax and then it goes on for a little bit longer. I didn't realize that it was like climax and then 4 hours.
Oh, the last fourth of the game.
Yeah.
Yes.
What the
It's a
hell?
weird spacing for the narrative.
Yep.
It's really bizarre. Someone wrote in on that exact topic. They say, this is Jonathan from Indiana. I've played through all 3 BioShock titles numerous times, and while the twist of the original is a worn hat by now, I still think the delivery is among narratives best in video games. Unfortunately, the game doesn't know how to handle its pacing post-twist. My question is this. Would you kindly delve into why there seems to needlessly be more content at the sacrifice of thematic and narrative consistency? Seeing how the Little Sisters were made was cool and all, but having it placed after the twist diminishes the impact as all you really want to do at that point is chase after Fontaine and enact your revenge.
I feel like Irrational learned after this, though, because like System Shock 2 actually had the same exact problem. Like you got to the twist, and then there was still a good third of the game left where you were just doing chores and stuff. But in Infinite, the twist is at the end. Like, yeah,
that's true.
It's at the very end, so there's not really anything after that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it sounds like a really easy problem to fix on paper. Like, obviously, there's probably stuff we're not aware of since we didn't work on the game. But it just sounds like something would be so easy to fix. You know,
I feel like they were going for maybe another thing that's kind of tried it out is like a weird thing was a Fight Club where they have the twist, but then it's not just the twist and then ending. Like it's not like M. Night Shyamalan. They try to figure out, okay, now you've learned this important thing about how the entire movie has played out.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? So, and I think they try to go for that, but they don't really.
They didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah,
at least that's my read on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice. Okay, now we learn a little bit more about Tenenbaum. I guess Fontaine can be like, oh, you're still following orders from her, aren't you? And there's a little bit played with there, but narratively, it just feels very aimless. I don't have a strong drive to really finish this thing off after that. Like Fontaine, I think, is a cartoon character and bad, but we can get into it then in a little bit. But I think, contrary to what you're saying, Suriel, I think the environments are actually really cool in the second half.
Yeah.
Like, I love the area with all, like, the posters of, like, the missing people and whatnot that are just stacked up really high. There's some areas that kind of look like kind of like an underwater subway, stuff like that. I think the environment design is really strong.
I've been crapping over that whole end section, but I do like the one bit where your powers are being messed with.
Yeah.
And you're forced to, like, new stuff or use new stuff.
Yeah.
But that should have been much earlier. Like, that could have been really cool much earlier on, I feel like.
Yeah. And to say
Would it make sense earlier?
They could find a reason for it to make sense. It's science fiction.
I feel like it works, though, because it comes at a point in the game when you're kind of stuck in a rut of what plasmids you're using.
Yeah, no, narratively, I think it's very well placed.
Yeah. So. It's confusing, though, because when he was cycling through, it was like, oh, Electrobolt 3, and all these powers that I didn't have yet.
Yeah, part of it was kind of
thing.
cool. It's just like I'd never had Winter Blast that entire playthrough, so suddenly I get to, freeze people and then bolt them in the face.
Right.
But like what I was saying about the environment, like the reason I don't like the environments is that I feel like they're a little too convenient. Like for one, you go to Apollo Heights and like Suchong, Tenenbaum, Sander Cohen all live in the same block somehow. Like
they had a sitcom.
Yeah, that's my favorite sitcom of the 1960s. And then like you go to the part where you're building the Big Daddy, and just all these like wildly different areas seem to all be coalesced in the same place. It just feels
That's
like
a good point.
a lot of areas built around like, okay, we need to hit these points, and we need to do it as quickly as possible.
The one part of that whole section that stands out to me the most every time like I'm done with the game, because I think it represents just sort of how much of a dull grind the last bit of the game is do you guys remember when there's that tunnel with like the subway cars or whatever and it's filled with water? Like to me that is just representative of that whole thing where you're just trekking through this, having to deal with this bullshit.
I like that there's one area in that there's one subway car where there's a ton of trap bolts, and you go up there and you say, oh, there must be something pretty cool. And there's just like a bunch of snacks. It's like some guy was just holed up with his this like collection of like candy bars and
Eating
chips
candy bars and rats.
Yeah, he's like, no, this is how I'm gonna wait out the apocalypse. It's just like with my safe and my candy bars, and I'm gonna wait this one out.
No
The
one will let me
Javy
eat
Gwaltney
candy.
method. Yes.
Exactly. So we should probably talk about the big old twist itself, because a lot of people obviously wrote in about that. Well, first of all, maybe we can just play it. Maybe we can get some audio from Andrew Ryan himself. I think he's on the phone here.
Sounds a little something like this.
Hey Andy, what's up?
And now he's come to murder me. In the end, what separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys. You think you have memories. A father, a family, an empire, a crash, and then this place. Was there really a family? Did that airplane crash? Or was it hijacked, forced down forced down by something less than a man, something bred to sleepwalk through life until they're activated by a simple phrase spoken by their kindly master. Was a man sent to kill or a slave? A man chooses. A slave obeys. Come in. Stop, would you kindly? Would you kindly? Powerful phrase. Familiar phrase.
Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
Sit, would you kindly? Stand, would you kindly? Run. Stop. Turn. A man chooses. A slave obeys.
There we go. We all remember.
Mm-hmm.
Good old Mr. Ryan.
Was that from my playthrough?
No.
Oh, okay. I just kept hearing the uncloaking sound,
Oh,
while he was
really?
talking. And I was like, oh man, I should have turned that off.
I was a little bit underwhelmed by that segment, and like Suriel mentioned, like obviously he gets spoiled, left and right and whatnot. But all I knew is, you beat him to death with this golf club. I was really struck by the idea that they take full control away from you.
Mm-hmm.
It seems obvious to me, and I'm curious why they didn't do this, where it's like, hey, the whole point is like you're following these video game objectives blindly, and now we're telling you to do these things. Wouldn't it have been 1,000 times more powerful if just the game wouldn't progress? If he says like, hey, run, sit, and it's like, until you press the button to do those things, it doesn't progress? Wouldn't that be more interesting?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to see like the execution of that, because that also might, as cool as it sounds in concept, it might just end up looking really dumb, like a slow ass QuickTime event,
What? I
They
guess
just
if it's slow,
tutorialized-
but
they did like a reverse tutorial where they said, run, and then they showed the prompt of like, use the control stick to move forward.
but at that point
The
you're
whole-
so deep in, you know how to do it.
smash
But the
B.
whole point is you have no control at all, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, but I think where the story is most interesting to me is kind of in a Stanley Parable-esque way, where it's like you have no control, but you've been going through the motions because of this video
Yeah.
game.
But
You've been
in
following
that-
this larger objective
In that
because of
section, it's all about not having any control at all and realizing that.
I guess.
I
but-
feel like forcing the control is maybe a little bit obvious, but I think they were just working within like the constraints of like, okay, we have to sort of drive this point home.
Yeah.
Like,
I get what Ben's saying here, because it is like a very odd turn still, like when you get there and then suddenly control is ripped away from you, because
Yeah.
the game's clever up until that point because you are doing what the video game tells you of your own free will in a way that
Right.
simulates having no will.
right.
But then it forces it out of your hand, which is, so there's kind of like a clash there.
yeah, it's because it's never had, like, you've never had to move involuntarily before. And, like it drives home the point of like, I thought I was doing this because I wanted to, but this entire time it's because I've basically been told to.
Actually, no. There is one other point, and that makes that scene make so much more sense. Is when Jack stabs himself with the Evo.
Yeah.
That's the first. Like the game takes away control from you.
That's true.
Yeah, and when we were talking about last time, like why did this dumbass do that? Well,
Right.
mind
Oh,
control.
Okay.
Well, what's your logic for him talking in the beginning then and then nowhere else?
What do you
I
mean?
remember we talked about that last time. You're like, I think there's a reason for that. Why Jack talks on the airplane in the opening. And
Because
then,
he saw the little note that said, "Would you kindly?" And so he opens it, and then he's just
No, but why does he talk during that then?
no idea.
Okay. Damn it, Jamie, you teased it last time.
So the thing that I think I hinted at in the last podcast was that like I'd have to go back and watch both of them, but I feel like he throws the gift a little more forcefully in the remastered version of the
okay.
of that intro video. I could be crazy, but like
I think you might be crazy.
I don't remember it being that obvious that he was, I guess in hindsight, that he was activating a bomb. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Wait. What is it that he says again?
His son, you were born to do great things. Well, you were right.
Well, yeah,
Something like that.
yeah. Well, I mean, we're also talking about like a lab project kid, like someone who was bred in a lab. So they could just tell him that over and over again. It becomes a sort of mantra before the Manchurian Candidate stuff takes over.
Right.
So was the only choice? So I'm just thinking narratively, but like, was the only choice we really had as Jack harvesting or saving little sisters?
Absolutely, yes.
That is the only
I guess so.
thing that we have a say in.
Yeah. Why?
So burn down the orphanage
And
or
why-
save it.
But why? I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting. that
Why?
we had that free
Yeah, he
will
he
in
never
the
tells you-
first place.
Right.
He never says like you would think like Fontaine would just be like, no, just kill them, get
Yeah,
more
'cause
Adam. Would you
you-
kindly kill all the little sisters you
Yeah,
encounter?
yeah.
I'm surprised they don't. Yeah, I'm
So
surprised
why,
they don't do that.
why did we have that choice?
That's a great question. I don't know. I am largely confused, and I'm curious to hear from Javy, who's played it 1,300 times. The Fontaine Ryan relationship is largely still a little bit confusing to me.
Okay.
But why wouldn't Ryan just tell him exactly what's going on? Like, why is he kind of willing to be killed by Jack?
Because, okay, Jack is Ryan's son.
Am I an idiot for not picking up on that? Someone
All
else
right, when you
mentioned
go
that.
into a strip club earlier, you go into, the dancer's room and she's
Yeah.
dead. And you pick up a video or an audio recording, and the implication is that Ryan had sex with her and that
Yeah.
she sold Jack to, what's his name? What's the scientist's name again?
Suchong?
Oh, Suchong.
Su Chong. So Su Chong and
Build
Tenenbaum
him.
work together. And so my reading there is that, and Ryan pretty much tells you this, is that Ryan is so disappointed with like his offspring being, a slave that he either, like that's the most humiliating thing he can do is, make you kill him, or, it's a way to try and break you of the trance. So it's interesting because you can either see it as like an act of like love or just like straight up venom. So there's a lot of like interpretation there.
Yeah.
It almost seemed like a really ruthless, strange way to drive his point home.
Yeah. There's also the two other bits
Driver
of-
his point home.
Yeah, there's
Wow.
Go ahead, Suriel.
they have like two little bits of evidence, but yeah, it's not something you're gonna pick up unless you play through the game again. Like they show you that memory of like Ryan going and finding a stripper, but like they tell you earlier on that like you only have those like images in your head if you have DNA from the person whose images you're seeing. So they're like, why would I have a flashback of Ryan unless I have his DNA? And the other thing is they say, I'm pretty sure it's an audio log that says is like Ryan originally it was supposed to just bring back the Vita chambers were only supposed to work for Ryan.
Oh.
And so no one else had access to the Vita chambers, and so you're left to think, well, why do I also have access to the Vita chambers?
Gotcha. God,
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. I did not pick up on any of that.
No, it's.
I mean, both of those things are things like that first one you're not going to pick up on that
Yeah,
on your first
that's
playthrough, and the second one you have to
pretty
find that
deep
audio
stuff.
diary.
Yeah.
But
So-
the most interesting thing about the tie-in novel is like it focuses explicitly on Ryan and Fontaine's back and forth, like through the second half. Like that is what that whole book is about, and it's like fun to read that.
Yeah.
Like why they hate each other so much, and like why Ryan's whole utopia basically falls apart because Fontaine's like, I'm gonna play the game better than you do.
Right.
Like he plays Ryan's game better.
So was Fontaine in charge first? Like Ryan built Rapture.
Ryan built Rapture, was in charge. Then Fontaine,
Had some sort of like criminal organization.
yeah, he
Basically
through
came up with
prostitution.
plasmids, right?
he
Okay.
basically brought plasmids into the picture.
Right.
Yeah,
But he was never fully in control at any point.
no, because the whole point is that his whole goal throughout the game was for him to have that full
overthrow.
control.
Okay.
And so I
Right.
think Ryan's whole conflict, I guess, is that he's mad at Fontaine for playing the game better than him, but he realizes that like in trying to fight against him, he's trying to put laws into place to control the free market. But then he realizes that's the whole point of Rapture has been to have the free market be free. So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah,
mad at Fontaine for forcing him to be the thing that he hates.
Yeah, he basically resents Fontaine for creating the market for plasmids. Like Fontaine didn't necessarily create plasmids, but he created the market
Because
for it.
it basically ends up proving that his society isn't perfect. That
Yeah.
isn't the
But then
His
utopia.
what's his
utopia isn't a utopia.
Okay. Then there's some line where Ryan says like, "Oh, he didn't understand the marketing potential of Little Sisters." So he still had some connection with the idea of harvesting Adam and whatnot. That's not completely disconnected from him, or is he just saying that he can improve on Fontaine's
For Ryan?
obsession?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like it's just
Wasn't he generally fine with the whole little sister situation?
yeah, like you find an
Which is
audio log where he's like, this
strange.
grosses me out, but it's profitable.
Like
Okay.
there were times where I'd really empathize with Andrew Ryan, and then there were other times where I was just like, I like your principles originally. I like that idea of making this kind of like utopian society, but then at the same time, it's like there's some really twisted stuff in between that.
Mhm.
You know, especially like, yeah, I'm just fine with, you know, the little sister situation, and that just seems really screwed up to me. And
And I think that's part of the reason BioShock works is because it's
he's not black and white in any way.
Yeah,
which-
it's an exploration of like the space between ideology and like
And
practicality.
I almost wonder if he became too hungry for power at one point.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And that's what drove Rapture into the ground in some ways.
Mhm. I disagree with his premise also that the only place this could exist is in a city under the sea.
It totally exists in space.
You could buy an island or go into space, for Christ's sake. There's other places you can go to here, Ryan. Also, I enjoyed the audio log where he's just talking about, like, you think anybody else could build this? They don't appreciate what an accomplishment this is. I feel like it's a little bit of the game developer coming through, Andrew Ryan, a little bit of that autobiographical thing of like, this is hard, everybody. Why don't you appreciate this more?
Sure.
So on the deep lore stuff here, Jeff from Massachusetts writes in again and says, I do love the twist, but it begs the question: why does Andrew Ryan let you kill him when he knows the trick? Is it a fatherly love thing? Has he just given up on life? JB already talked about that. Is it well thought out that you are Ryan's child and have enough of his genetic makeup to slow down the security systems? This also means that the splicers are just defending Ryan and you're really the bad guy of the story up to this point. As for the twist, there were some indicators. Peach Wilkins tells you flat out, quote, "You're doing Fontaine's work." At the time, you don't really know much about Fontaine, so it's easy to miss. Ryan at one point tells you you're a puppet. And then more importantly, he's wondering, the picture you see in your flashbacks, is that Fontaine and Tenenbaum behind you? Or who are the people in the picture of your parents?
Was that Suchong and Tenenbaum?
I don't know. JV, you're thinking really hard about this.
It doesn't seem like it's Suchong. Like maybe
Yeah.
it's just a photo they held up to Jack while he was in the lab saying, remember this, this is your family, you know, because there's a lot of leeway there, but it could be.
Sure.
Could be actors. Or
Yeah, whatever.
One thing that I never 100% like understood was like if the game starts with him not knowing who you really are, right? And then by the end of it, he's like, "Oh, you're my kid." And also, I guess I found the room that had the very obvious "Would you kindly" scrawled on it. So I guess this is what happened. And there's for some reason Suchong like decided to have a podcast in there and tell everybody about how this whole thing works. So at the end, he's like, "Oh, I completely know what's going on." So I guess I don't understand how that arc happens.
Wait, well, I mean, so much of it, you know, it's implication, right? Like, okay, why can Jack get past security, chambers or what? Why can he get past the security systems? Because he has Ryan's DNA. Ryan knows that, that the woman sold his genetic material. You know, she knows that. So,
Right. Okay.
yeah. So it's a stacking of evidence there. I don't think it's like too much of a leap for him to figure it out, basically.
But then there's that room like right next to his office. That's just like the most obvious thing in the world.
Jared from Indiana says, so I've been playing BioShock, and my girlfriend, who is not a gamer, has been watching me. Well, she picked up on the whole "would you kindly" phrase when you first make it to Rapture. To try and preserve it, I just played it off as if it was a totally normal phrase to say. So when we finally got to the twist, her reaction was to yell at me, and then she started to freak out that Atlas was a bad guy. P.S. She fell in love with BioShock, and we decided to name our new kitten Atlas. So I'm glad that Game Club named a kitten.
All right.
Cute.
I'm glad you said kitten and not like we decided to name our kid Atlas.
There's just been like this eerie silence as we just like,
Look, I know that's the
okay.
reference you're trying to go for, but other kids aren't going to see it that way if you name your kid Atlas.
My kid's middle name is Electrobolt 2. Jonathan Quevedo writes in and says, one of the interesting things about BioShock is that, like other books or movies with a great twist, it causes you to want to replay it just to see all the times the wool was pulled over your eyes.
Yep.
This is true.
I mean, knowing that it was the key phrase, it definitely stands out when you play it. And then they do the thing, which I'm always split on in games or movies or TV shows where they have a twist and then they show like the flashback to like,
By the
remember
way,
this, remember this, everybody.
Right.
I think a huge part of that thing's success is Atlas's accent, and they talk about that in the one of the documentary features they have.
Oh yeah, what did they say?
They wanted to look for the right voice actor. They don't delve too much into it, but they say like we had to nail it so that it's not super obvious. And for whatever, like they said the phrase at some point was Excelsior, because Ken Levine was like a huge Stan Lee fan.
Yeah,
but it was supposed to be like just a substitute for something more substantive later on. And I guess eventually at some point it evolved having "Would you kindly" in that sort of like thick accent. And I don't think if it was if it was a different voice actor going, "Would you kindly do this, please?" I think that would stand out a lot more if they repeated it over and over. But I think that accent specifically makes that.
Where it's like, is that just an Irish thing? They're constantly saying.
I mean, it just kind of flowed very well at the end of his sentences too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it was just always just.
Would you kindly?
Yeah, yeah, it worked.
Pat O'Connor says on that front, he's from Ireland. He says, I know you guys found the whole Irish accent thing a bit over the top, but I think that plays into the ultimate reveal in Fontaine's intelligence overall. Rapture is a multicultural city, and throughout the game we hear Asian, Eastern European, English, Italian, German, and various American accents. It makes sense for Fontaine's everyman guys to be another immigrant seeing their fortunes in Rapture. I think it creates a more believable and relatable character while also facilitating a liquid snake twist by allowing the voice actor to portray the characters using wildly different accents. As an Irishman myself, it was a rare and amazing experience to hear an authentic Irish accent voiced by an Irish actor in a video game. I didn't know that it was authentic. But if he's Irish and he says it sounds good, then all right.
He's more of an expert on it than any of us.
Yeah.
That voice actor must have, if he did both, I'm not sure. He must have had a lot of fun in that booth doing these very distinct
Fontaine voice.
It's okay. Fontaine. It's so stupid. The idea of him going so over the top where it's just like maniacal laughter. Like, Atlas is a somewhat interesting character and you feel for him with the family. Like, they could have reined that stuff in by 300% and it still would have worked as him being a villain. But it's so over the top with him just calling over the intercom just to taunt you mercilessly. It's like, what are you doing, man? He used to be a human being.
Yeah, it doesn't really work. Like, if they had just played it off as like more of a shadowy, sinister character, like that would have been so much more interesting. Or even like, you know, a nerd. I wanted to fight a nerd when I got to
JV.
That's true.
Yeah, he has this weird drawl where he's just, all right, kid. You think you're so cool.
He sounds like a boxer who just got beat too much in the mouth.
Yeah, for sure. But he brings up the Liquid Snake comparison. You know, for all the praise about like the "would you kindly" twist, the whole twist of like, oh, the guy guiding you along was secretly evil. It's like this is done 1,000 times,
including in System Shock.
Well, it's that it's packaged in like the way. Have you guys seen The Usual Suspects? That movie from 1995 with Kevin Spacey. Yeah, you have you?
Oh, the 1995 film Usual Suspects. Yes, JV. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I never know with you, Ben Hanson.
I love Usual Suspects. Yeah.
Yeah, but that it's packaged that way with like the flashbacks, like. I think that's what makes it stand out to people. Whereas the other ones, like the Metal Gear Solid Liquid Snake twist, is just, you know, that one's more subtle. You know, which sounds hilarious because we're talking about Metal Gear Solid. Right. BioShock is like hammering it in your face for like that whole sequence.
They're
with
wrenching it.
Ryan. Yeah, wrenching it.
Paul, also from Ireland. International audience. I love this. As a big fan of BioShock, I really don't like, quote, the twist. I find the finger wagging at the player for doing as he was told is uninteresting as there is no other choice. You either do what Atlas says to progress or stop playing. What are your thoughts on this?
I think the twist wasn't necessarily to be like a Spec Ops kind of twist where they were like, you're kind of messed up for doing this, but more like, isn't the illusion of choice kind of
exactly.
It's like it's a joke.
That's the whole point is trying to bring up the topic of illusion of choice.
Yeah, but I can definitely see how someone would take that sequence and say like, well, what else was I supposed to do?
Especially if they're playing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Now.
I felt there was a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, I still think there's a lot of depth.
Yeah,
to
the
it.
first time I saw that, like I played that sequence back in like 2007. It was one of those things where I have to stop playing and be with myself with my thoughts for a little bit.
No, it's
I still think it's powerful. Like all these years later, I still think it's powerful.
Andrew from Florida writes in, he says, when I first played BioShock, when it came out, I hated it. And then everything changed when the hammer was dropped and Andrew Ryan's life was ended by my own hand. He thinks it's one of the greatest twists of all time. Do you think BioShock would be this entrenched in gaming culture if it wasn't for the twist?
Absolutely not.
No, yeah.
It's largely dependent on that hook?
Absolutely. Like it hinges on that hook.
I mean, I still think if they removed that segment, it'd be a fun game.
Yeah,
it'd be a fun game.
It would be
fun
like
to
play,
yeah.
but
we would not be talking about it.
It
right
would
now.
be a much more likely subject for like a replay or something where it's like, oh, remember this game? Remember BioShock?
What an original idea.
Yeah, and whereas now it's just like it's the most talked about game. It's like one of the most talked about games for that.
We didn't see that a whole lot back then, and now we have like Stanley Parable and all these other things that talk about choice in video games. But there, it did it in a really sophisticated way. that really got you thinking. So
Right.
Yeah, it would be talked about as much as everything post the twist,
Yeah.
which is never mentioned.
Mhm.
So Mike Leha from North Adams says, I would definitely agree. The game peaks after Fort Frolic. It seemed that the remaining levels were a lot more straightforward and less room to explore. So after the game's big reveal, I have a difficult time viewing Andrew Ryan as my enemy. To me, he's just a man with a failed vision. He may rank high on the food chain of Rapture, but it's really that S-Bag Atlas or Fontaine who gets my blood boiling, making it personal. I almost feel sympathetic of Ryan, his own vision turned against him through Fontaine. He looks disheveled in BioShock 2's audio logs, making that image of a man struggling with his own creation even more sad, knowing his fate from the previous game. At any rate, I've come to the conclusion that Andrew Ryan is merely the face of Rapture, but Fontaine is the true antagonist in this story. Do you guys have more hate for Fontaine than Andrew Ryan? Any sympathy
No.
there?
no sympathy.
No? We're
No, I
saying
mean,
that
I
we're kind
have-
of into
Sorry
Ryan?
I thought you meant Fontaine.
Okay, well, let's go with Ryan.
I have sympathy for Andrew Ryan, absolutely. It's that he it's interesting because he is trying to build. He obviously loves Rapture and what he built, and it's like seeing that fail and crumble before him is devastating.
Yeah, for me, it's not a matter of like hating one or the other more. I just think that Ryan is like an idea that's brilliantly executed, and the Atlas/Fontaine is a really cool idea that's not well executed at all, especially in the latter half where it's revealed to be Fontaine.
Right.
Yeah,
I like Fontaine's accent more than I like his character.
Yeah, I like the switch in the accent, but it just
I
he
don't.
falls so flat when you figure out who he actually is.
What was the whole little nugget when Fontaine said, I was even a guy from China for 6 months? Ain't
Yeah,
that weird?
In that latter half, I feel like there's a lot of stuff they set up and then don't follow through. Like he keeps questioning, like, Tenenbaum's not the kind of not the person you think she is, because he talks about like, isn't it a little weird that someone would survive both World War II and Rapture?
Right,
well,
what kind of person would have to do that? And then they don't do anything like that.
that's because they deal with it in the book.
Really?
Like, yeah, like it's really weird because like Fontaine and Tenenbaum actually have a sexual relationship in the book.
Cool.
That it's just like, and it's hilarious because it's 2 pages where it just happens, and Tenenbaum's like, "Yeah, let's do it," and then never comes up again, never.
So what is
And then and the thing with the with acting is what is it? Fontaine like is a con man and an actor, and like that's just what it was. Like there's a good portion of the book dedicated to explaining his sketchy past to someone, like just making it with various accents and makeup and stuff.
Would you recommend this book?
I mean, if you like BioShock, sure, the writing's not that great, but
Okay. Yeah.
So what was the whole thing like? What was he alluding to with Tenenbaum? Like, was that he just was like a
Just-
jilted lover, or
because Tenenbaum is like implied to be involved with sort of Nazi kind of experiments,
Uh-huh.
so it's just kind of strange, like or kind of skeevy a little bit.
Yeah, I don't feel like they.
They didn't trace that out in the game that well.
Okay.
Well, there's in the game. There's one audio log from like the paparazzi guy talking about Tenenbaum and Fontaine being together and whatnot. Let's see. So people writing about the twist a lot. Let's see. So people also wrote in a little bit more about the gameplay. We have Nicholas who says, I think it'd be interesting to talk about how the player's death is handled in BioShock. One issue I have with narrative-focused video games is that the death respawn cycle usually breaks the immersion, i.e. is handled in a narratively inconsistent way. Side note, Idle Thumbs actually talked about this when discussing Inside. They also mentioned Steve Gainer's podcast with Ken Levine, which I do recommend as well. Anyways, they say, BioShock at least somewhat solves this problem by using the Vita chambers, which remove the immersion-breaking return to a load or menu screen upon death. They also try to tie the underlying technology to the lore, even if it basically boils down to something plasmids. I still feel the system is not entirely logical. Someone drags Jack into a Vita chamber every time he dies. He's cloned, but then where is his body? Another side note, is there a first-person shooter where the player actually sees his deceased past selves lying where they died?
A first-person shooter.
In Prey, you turn into a ghost when you die, don't you? But you go
Okay.
to like the spirit realm or whatever.
Like World of Warcraft?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One other thing that I think this is also in the remaster, and I'm more certain of this in the thing in the beginning of the game. I'm pretty sure that when you died in the original game, it would just cut to white, and then you're in the Vita chamber. Whereas in this one, they have this whole sequence where you fly. Like your point of view flies from your body to the Vita chamber.
I
really
can say
quickly.
you are 100% incorrect on this, Suriel.
Do they do
Yeah,
that?
because I switched back to the original version.
Oh,
It totally
really?
jumps back through it.
I
I was
guess-
thinking, like, it's pretty impressive tech for 2007 to kind of like rewind you through everything
Oh.
you've done, even if it is.
I guess I
crudely-
didn't. Yeah, 'cause maybe.
Yeah, it's totally there. What do you guys think about that idea of narratively working respawning into a game?
I think it's really cool if you can pull it off.
Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah.
But in terms of seeing your past selves, it reminds me of this platformer called Claws. I don't know if any of you have played
No.
it, but it's this little indie platformer that came out earlier this year. And there's this one area called the Glitch World, and like everything is glitchy, and you're going through, and every time you die, a copy of yourself is made, your corpse. But you actually have to use your death in clever ways. Like every time you die, you have to kind of climb onto your corpse to make a bridge across a gap.
Oh, perfect.
We're back at corpses again.
Good old handy corpses.
You know,
Speaking of
yeah,
corpses,
it's topical.
there's a game by Suda Goichi called Flower, Sun, and Rain where the entire premise is like Groundhog Day, where the whole thing is you're supposed to stop this bomb from going off in a plane, and every day it still happens, so you have to rewind or whatever.
Okay.
And they have this really cool visual thing where the plane always flies past like the image of the sun and then explodes right after, which is like some surreal thing. But at the end of the game, you find the layer where all the people from all of your cells from the previous days are, and they're all just stacked on top of each other. Like you realize that there's been this machine that's just been cranking out copies of you every day.
cool.
It's a pretty
cool.
pretty cool sequence.
A little bit like Swapper,
Yeah.
if you guys remember that.
Yeah.
So Chuck from Maine is talking at a similar point, but he has a problem with it. He says, during your first BioShock Game Club segment, you mentioned several influences BioShock has had on the industry. I've heard it credited with starting another trend that you didn't talk about, which many gamers would say is a negative thing, removing all penalties for dying. When you respawn, the game state is exactly how you left it. Because of this, literally, you can go through the game with just the wrench and you're still guaranteed to eventually succeed. This was the first major game to start this trend, and it seemed to be a big spark for the lowering of difficulty in games in general. Do you think this assertion is fair? And if so, do you ink the trend toward easier gaming has been a negative thing? Thank you for taking the time to read.
Absolutely not. Let there be easier gaming. Like, I think, you widen how many people you can let in and, really enjoy what video games have to
It's
offer.
such personal choice, though,
Yeah.
and I've never been one who likes overly difficult games. I just find that frustrating.
And you can still bump
And
this thing
I
up to
don't see
hard.
why
Yeah.
that should be.
You
I
can
should
turn
be
that
ashamed
off.
of that in a
Yeah.
way. Like everyone has their experiences that they prefer, and I personally liked BioShock for that fact.
Yeah, and it's not like there is, a lack of super hard games like that are just hard
No.
at their normal.
Or even the
There-
ability to make this game really hard. if
yeah,
you
yeah,
wanted to.
like,
Absolutely.
like Dark
There
Souls
are-
and stuff.
I also feel like by the time BioShock came out and like kind of did away with that, people were already sort of like claiming the downfall of like video games being too easy just because of regenerating health.
Yeah.
Right. Which is around that same era then, I guess, in Modern Warfare. Then.
I think I don't think that it's necessarily the catalyst. I think it's more like if you want to take that line of thinking, I feel like it's more of a symptom than the catalyst.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the front, we talked about it a lot with the last episode, but I think one of the biggest accomplishments with BioShock is taking sophisticated gameplay, different ways to approach these combat situations, a pretty complex plot, and making it so approachable. And so the
Right.
Vita Chambers respawn thing, I just see it as another layer of like, yeah, we want people to actually enjoy playing this game.
And I think on some level it makes it more accessible for people who don't play a whole lot of games.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's BioShock to me is incredible because it takes, so many philosophical ideas that would just on their own sort of be, oh, well, let's read this stuff in a boring textbook, but makes it digestible in a blockbuster sort
Yeah.
of shooter.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
Very
incredible.
well done
for
in
sure.
That, way.
That is just incredible.
Well, speaking of really thoughtful ideas here, Barbara Joe writes in again and says, "What's with all the dead cats? I came across quite a
saw
few
those
during my
too.
playthrough. Aside from the occasional fish here and there, that was the only evidence of animal life in Rapture. It struck me as very strange. With Rapture being such a large city, I would have thought there'd be some dogs, birds, or some other kinds of pets, but there are only cats. Do you think there's any significance to this? Simple set dressing, metaphor for Rapture's self-destructive nature, in-game representation of Schrodinger's cat? Thoughts?"
I got nothing.
I don't know. I remember finding a dead cat on a stove, and I'm like, man, how did that happen? Do
Who's
I want to
bringing
know
cats
what's going
down
on
here?
here?
I feel as someone who recently hunted for apartments, I feel like the dogs have sometimes their own separate rent, and sometimes it's really expensive. So
true.
I feel like dogs would have been too expensive to have in Rapture. Also, they could have more likely to have destroyed Rapture by just like bursting a pipe or something.
Not to mention, like I've watched and read a lot of Heathcliff, and he loves fish skeletons to eat, and so there must be so many fish skeletons down there. The cats can just shove a whole fish in their mouth and pull out the fish skeleton perfectly. It's the easiest pet And cats are monsters, just like the splicers. So it all works out. Liam
monsters.
says
Cats.
from North Carolina, he says, "Hey, GI, I'm sure you're aware of the failed BioShock movie that was to be directed by Gore Verbinski several years back. He was the Pirates of the Caribbean director. Having completed the game and with the story fresh in your minds, do you think a good film adaptation of this story could be made? Who would you want to direct the film? Who would you cast as Jack or Andrew Ryan? P.S. The BioShock prequel novel is actually quite good."
Yeah, that's the book. Absolutely not.
No movies.
No, it would have to be like an HBO miniseries
I
about
could
the
see
fall of
that.
Rapture.
Yeah.
But like BioShock itself works as a video game. It would not work as a movie, I think.
I think it could work.
Not the story that we play. I don't think the story we play as Jack
I
could
think
work.
so much of BioShock is that interactivity, you
Yeah.
know.
I think having the
It's
twist would be
so-
laughable in a movie of like, oh, you've been following
it
the wrong
would.
orders. Like, yeah, okay, I've seen a movie before. I
Yeah.
understand this.
Some of the philosophical stuff would still stand, but a lot of the narrative twists would just fall flat, I would say.
That's not to say it could not be perfectly enjoyable, especially as like a dumb sort of
But it
horror
would-
movie.
yeah.
But
Dumb.
For those of us that have played the game, I think
yeah,
I would watch.
it would lose its luster.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with JV that.
But
Something set in that universe would be cool.
yeah, like a prequel series about okay, well here's Ryan or here I was about to say Reiner.
Everybody does.
Andrew Reiner.
I was thinking about things earlier, and I was like, yeah, Andrew Reiner. Wait.
But like Ryan building the city and watching it fall apart, like a 10-episode miniseries would be great.
Yeah.
I would watch that.
For sure.
Who would you cast?
As Andrew Ryan.
Andrew Reiner.
I think it's the only way to go. That or like Walt Disney in his 30s, just clone him somehow.
I'd go Josh Brolin.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I don't know. Josh Brolin's got a little bit too much of like Southern stuff. Whenever he does that role, he just sounds sort of like a roughneck.
I feel like he could shave off that accent, maybe.
Maybe no.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a regular Fontaine. He can do whatever he wants. Your real question is, Jack, I mean, which hand model do you get to kind of be right in
I
front of
mean-
the camera? It's really tough.
Well, just get the guy who did what was that first person movie?
Hardcore Henry.
right.
Yeah, just get hardcore.
Yeah,
Henry.
my
That was-
favorite actor, the protagonist from Hardcore Henry.
Good lord.
Can you
that
make
movie.
a good
Oh, my.
fist and a curled arm shooting plasmids? That's all that matters. But on this podcast, this very podcast, when we interviewed Ken Levine, he said that he was doing something or approving some script in the BioShock universe. When I asked about the movie, then he said like, "Oh, nothing's ever really dead in Hollywood." So maybe there's still something on the horizon. I'm with you. I would love to see it as a miniseries. I think it could do really well, told long form, but maybe not Jack's story
Yeah.
per se.
I'm good with
Sure.
I think we've had all we can with Jack's story.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
could just have something in the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elise, first time finishing BioShock. What were your overall thoughts? What'd you think?
I loved it. I mean, a lot of the twists I hadn't seen firsthand. I knew about a lot of them, but I thought it was great. I thought it really held up even after all these years. It was great. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I recommend it to people who haven't
And
played it.
I think out of anyone, I was just fascinated by Andrew Ryan's character. That really pulled me in.
What a dreamboat.
Oh boy. No, that's Steinman. we
That's
talked
right.
about.
Oh, man, Simon. Yeah, I was really amazed by how accessible it was.
Yeah.
The back half, I was really amazed
and just
by
so
how much
much-
people love it.
So much fun to play at the same time, you know, like
Yeah.
testing out all the different plasmids, and
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, I was a little bit underwhelmed by the story in the back half. World
Yeah.
clearly amazing. Twist maybe gets a little bit too much credit, but I understand 2007 it was a completely different time in the industry and stuff like that. I really, really enjoyed that experience,
Yeah, I
except for the
enjoyed it
fetch quests, which was the entire back half.
Yeah.
Do you have any new bold thoughts, JV?
No, I mean, experience that bold or that sort of dull back half it reinforced, just how much I appreciate everything that comes before it, like just how good everything that comes before it is, because you have to forgive a lot of that game.
Yeah.
Like, because that entire back half, like you say, is fetch quest. So everything that comes before it is just kind of magical.
There is one moment that I really enjoyed. I think in the first episode we talked a lot about like, oh, cool, bold decisions and whatnot in the gameplay. There's a moment I think it's right after you kill Andrew Ryan, where they're like opening the door with a blowtorch, the splicers, and it's just this
Yes,
long
right.
burn of that
Yeah,
slowly
that's
going down the door.
great.
And then when it bursts open, it's just chaos. Like it kicks in so hard. It's such a good little moment of suspense.
Right.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Suriel, any takeaway thoughts?
No, I'm good.
Great.
I've-
Have we
I've
exhausted?
said- yeah, we have. I think
We-
I've said everything.
Yeah, we've said pretty much everything we want to say.
All right.
All right.
And we hope that the community was able to get every thought they ever had about BioShock off their chest. I really enjoyed reading all the emails. Even if I didn't get to it, I really appreciate you sending that in and playing along with us. It's a super cool thing when you guys do it. That's it for the BioShock Game Club, everybody.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for tagging along, guys.
Yeah. What do you guys want to do next?
That Dishonored 2 idea.
Yeah, I'm
sounds-
into Dishonored too.
Here's the thing. So someone wrote in with it. I think a lot of people in the office would like to do it too. I am not into the idea of doing like 3 immersive first-person shooters or FPS games in a row.
The Cross 3D.
Interesting. I want to
What
change
about
up
the guy
genre a
who
little bit.
messaged who suggested Earthbound?
That'd be fun.
That would be really. I love Earthbound to death.
Hang on.
so.
JV's face is distorting.
Wow.
It's like there's a tracking error.
no.
on
I
his
didn't say anything.
jawline.
Don't.
You monster.
Do you not?
You didn't say
I-
anything, but faces say so
We're talking about
much.
this later. FYI.
I plead the fifth.
Would you kindly play Earthbound?
There is a leading contender for Game Club in my mind right now, and it's closer to Earthbound than it is Dishonored 2. But I think it'd be fun to do a newer game next. So we'll definitely.
Oh, okay.
Hey, you know what, listeners and viewers, we'll be in touch.